Some more about ODs, operational directives. The way in which I first presented this several weeks ago may have left, and I was aware at the time, but left the impression that operational directives, at the very least, was something that you should attempt to do, that you should attempt to at least remember it. When you have had the distinct sensation that something was correct, whether you felt as though you had the power to do it, whether you seemed to have the ability to remember to do it all the time. But now you've had at least 2 weeks for anyone who cared to think it over. And I want to point out a little more specifically that what I really intend by the idea, the reality behind the words operational directive, is an obligation to do something, to actually do something that you know is correct. It's to do something and not merely attempt to do it, not merely to attempt to remember to do it, not merely to attempt to remember to think about it, not simply to attempt to remember that when you first heard about it, or at one time when you heard about it or thought about it, you thought, this may be important. That was good 2 weeks ago, if that's what you got. It should be what would be felt to be an imperative on your part of understanding, of hearing, of feeling that something is correct. To hell with whether it's true, but that it is, as far as you can tell, as far as you are concerned, it is correct. The correctness of something is not entangled with the truth of it, because the truth of it, as you should know in the binary world, the truth, in quotation marks of anything, is also the untruth of it. It's debatable. You can change your mind. There is always someone holding a diametrically opposed view of it. There has got to be the untruth of whatever the thing is, the subject, the idea. There has to be an untruth of it for there to be a truth of it. But I am trying to get you to see that the stakes can be upped, not in a binary fashion, but going off into a right angle, wherein things are correct. And by correct, I mean there is no opposite. Correct is not the way which I'm using it. I guess you could put in quotation marks or a capital C for the time being. Correct has no opposite. Correct is temporary. It's not true. It's way beyond true. And what was correct for you, you may have forgotten about 6 months later. A year later, if for some reason, I can't imagine that's what happened, but if for some reason someone said, hey, aren't you the person that a year ago thought and acted as though so-and-so was correct? And for whatever reason, I can't imagine you were forced to respond and you went, yeah. And they say, but now you act like it's not correct anymore. And to yourself, you might quote Kyroots and say, hey, tell me about progress. Or, go back to the beginning of that little scenario, you might display one of the real weapons of a real revolutionist when they say, aren't you the person that a year ago acted and seemed to thought that this was correct? And you would then display that grandest, or one of the grandest of weapons, an absolute bad memory. You might not even remember doing it. You might not admit it, which is the same thing. A real revolutionist would understand another term, or he would have his own term, and that is that purpose directs posture. The correctness of something dictates what someone does, not the truth of it, because the truth of it is a kind of common currency that's out there amongst the people out in the marketplace, run-of-the-mill merchants and bankers, the soldiers. The government itself deals in that kind of currency, and they argue over what's true. They argue over what's not true. It changes from time to time, but when it changes amongst ordinary people, it seems to be of some significance, is important, and they will remember it. If you say to let us call it a culture or a state, if you said to the state, you people at one time believed that this kind of homicide, that it was not true that this kind of homicide was acceptable, and now you are practicing it and allowing it. They would remember, yes, but they would say, we have changed for the better. Wherein our eyesight previously was flawed, we now see more correctly. That is the world of true and false. The world of correctness does not change like that. It's all is temporary, but it's temporary at another level. But it does not turn into its own opposite. Correctness simply disappears when it's outused or when it's used up. Correctness does not turn into something else. It's just gone. Therefore, correctness, if you begin to follow what I'm pointing at, or for you people with higher education, at which I am pointing, you can begin to see, you've already had the experience, that there is no opposite for what I mean for correct. Correct is that which is useful. Correct is that which you right now understand to be correct. That aha. And for it to actually be correct, in a sense, to paraphrase little Kyroots, it's got to almost take your breath away. It's got to be startling. And it's got to make you grin. That's what's correct. Things that are true, who knows? They're debatable. Your ordinary binary consciousness knows as much about what is true as Aristotle did, or as your mother did, as the Pope did. Everybody knows what's true. Everybody knows what's untrue. It's just people deal in different currency from time to time. And what some people call true right now would be like a lira, and what somebody calls untrue would be $1. All you got to do is step across the lobby to another money changer, step across the border to another land, and what was untrue at one place is not true. And that's not the case with that which is correct. That which is correct for a person does not turn into its opposite. It does not turn into a leopard, to an accordion, to anything. It's correct, and then it's just gone. That is its usefulness. It does not make one strangle on the currency. And you do not waste your time in binary concepts. As if you could do anything else with binary concepts. Once in my make-believe land, my make-believe state, out in the bushes with some of the revolutionists, I overheard somebody say, hey, I'm not sure what they're referring to, it's not important, but something had just happened. Or something was just said, an idea was just presented, but I overheard somebody from the bushes where the revolutionists hang out, somebody said, hey, this is worse than sin, this is useless. Which is one reason I used to like to hang around that state. The truth, as the binary mind would have it, as you should see by now, is useless. It is useless. If there was any value to it, nobody would need this kind of activity. If there's any value to it, philosophers would indeed be kings. Ordinary consciousness would not be a one-way street going in two directions. Binary consciousness would not even be. There would be no debates, there'd be no discussions. How about some more information from the state, from that place? Another aspect in the great capital S state is only the ordinary, only the populace, only the people. Whether we're talking about out there or somewhere else, you got to track it. But it's only the ordinary people believe and act as though thinking and talking about something is almost as good, exciting, and revolutionary as actually doing it. Only the people, only the masses, only the people, which of course includes everybody except the revolutionists. It's only them folks that act, and I assure you believe, or look into yourself and see whether I can assure you. I'm going to repeat most of what I said because I don't mean it in some rhetorical sense, but it's only the ordinary people that act and think, believe, that just talking and thinking about something is, and underline the next word, almost, really, is almost as good as doing it. It's almost as exciting. It's almost as pregnant with possibilities. It is just almost as good as actually doing it. That is a very subtle little hole out in no man's land in which many, 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 many would-be revolutionists throughout history and right up until when? Right when? Now. That people step into, such as believing that they're becoming an expert in some temporary map-making excursion, believing that the propaganda of some revolutionist, some real revolutionist, is fact, believing that some real revolutionist proclaimed program is permanent. Worse yet, that it's true. Which, of course, the same thing as believing that some of it's false. It doesn't matter. If you step into that ditch, then you end up, and you never know it, of doing nothing. You may attend meetings somewhere, you may read books, you may make notes, but you don't do anything. You feel better, you think, but you got nothing to compare it to because you've forgotten exactly how you felt before. You just feel like you feel some better. And it may be that you're drinking less, you may have lost some weight. What else? You may have bought, if not a new car, you had your old one painted. Or conversely, you may decide to hell with cars and you start riding the bus, or you let yours just go to hell and threw it away. Anyway, the sensation that I'm in some way better off than I was earlier. But your memory is such that you're not really sure. But there is a sensation that I have certainly benefited from this, and I continue to enjoy it. Maybe. But I have, and surely you have, I've met people that I guess qualify as being alcoholics, been drinking all their life, that still say, hey, I enjoy it. They're harder to find than those that feel guilty about it and wear you out and ruin your own drink, dealing with them, but there are those around. Some more about the state. Maybe someday I'll bring out a chart if I continue this for any length of time, or tell you, but I have sort of pictured in my own little, what do you call it? Mind. The state with a capital S. See, my little fictitious state. But the whole world's made up of states. People are made up of internal states and all that. But inside of each state I can picture, and externally too, but I can picture the institutions, the necessary institutions of the state. And all these should be with capital letters. The military, merchants, bankers, artistes, the ruling powers, capital R, capital P, not the power, not by the old conspiracy theories, but the ruling power, the apparent government. And there should be with a capital O, capital L and a capital O should be the loyal opposition. But all this is true internally. So, ruling power is like the king, the monarch, the apparent prevailing controlling agency, which comes and goes. It can be overthrown and is overthrown. Not to be confused with the capital P power, not the ruling power, etc., but the real power, the secret power. But on that basis, what I was going to mention for a bit was that if the ruling power, the ruling powers in a state, if the ruling powers do not control speech, then the ruling powers have no control. You can take that to the place where some people leave their money. That should be obvious enough externally, the kind of places that people from our position on the planet refer to as tyrannies and autocratic regimes. That surely one of the first things they do when those kinds of regimes become the ruling power is they what? They control speech. If the ruling powers are not controlling speech, they're not controlling anything. If they do not have control of speech of the people, then they got no control. Now I ask you, let's jump from that wonderful world of sovereign states out here and see if that sounds as though it might be an inverted echo internally. What is the feeling of progress, of change in an ordinary person? From whence do they believe comes the impetus to change? How might this fit with my erstwhile conjectured partnership arrangement internally? Let me take a slightly askew approach, a corollary approach to what I'm talking about. The development en masse of humanity and in people individually, the development of one's apparent individual sense of I, this sense of an individual self, could be seen as likened to what would externally be the progression from a primitive anarchy, childhood, to a more stable monarchy. What else is the apparent progression in an individual life, in the life of humanity? But you had your own individual life to examine, other children. Is it not likened to, if we were describing it, comparing it to an external state, the progression from a primitive form of anarchy, a child, to a more complex, sophisticated, stable monarchy? And that you have what would amount to running these parallel tracks of apparently a sovereign external state, and then what I might be referring to actually internally in an individual, this progression from anarchy to monarchy. Be like the ruling powers out there, the ruling powers in you, the would-be ruling powers, coming from this chaotic childhood sense of internal anarchy. It's like the would-be ruling powers starting out calling for, gradually of course, but calling for calm and quiet. After all, what would be one of the first things of some group, or even just some individual, trying to take over the exercise of power with a mob, that the people are in a state of anarchy? One of the first things you got to do is calm them down. That's one of the first things that grown-ups do to children. Once it reaches a point that life arranges it where everybody's got a scapegoat, but where child psychologists say, well, this child's old enough to calm down, which just, I might add, coincidentally seems to be about the same time that parents believe, I can't stand him more of this shit, I'm going to kill him or her. But it seems, then suddenly it seems to be the right time to try and get the child to calm down, and at least sometimes, when I say so, be quiet. Just calm down. You know, go to your room, read a book. Then you could see this kind of progression of the would-be ruling powers. Then they attempt, and they say that they are beginning to speak for all of you. And then a short step after that is, we are speaking for the good of all of you. Does this sound like a would-be tyrant? Does this sound like a parent? Does this sound like anything that ever came from inside your own head that you heretofore attributed to something else? But there is something in the midst of this chaos of childhood, this feral state of simplicity, of wildness. There seems to arise a voice. Calm down, let's be quiet. Then the voice, for all intents and purposes, seems to be saying, I'm beginning to speak for all of you. And then very shortly after that, as long as the mob does not rush up and strangle the would-be monarch, then just right after that, as soon as they go, oh, he says, or she says, not only am I speaking for all of you, I'm speaking only for the good of all of you. There's the only reason I'm doing it. Right after that, which right after that could be a gradual number of months, years, some people questionable, whether it ever reaches this point, well, most people it does, is then there is the announcement, the proclamation of the would-be ruling powers, but it appears to be a power internally, a final proclamation from the would-be ruling power of their sole supremacy, that they are now a monarch, that the power lies with a single source. That, if we're speaking externally, is when a state apparently has gone from a condition of primitive, simplistic anarchy into a more complex and a stable. We're not talking about whether it's good from an American viewpoint or a Russian viewpoint or an Albanian viewpoint, but it has gone then to a stable condition of a monarchy instead of anarchy. A person that then, if we go from apparently out there to that sovereign state inside to your state, an individual state, it is now a matter that you apparently are an reasonably acceptable adult. That there seems to be somebody inside Fred or Mary that's in charge. This, however, now that passes for adulthood. That is a very good, if not charming, description that I have conjured up. But this leaves an ill-diagnosed, it can't be otherwise, binary, 3D view of the internal state of development, the apparent development of one's individual self, one's adult I. That you're left then, even after you have seen, you the people, have apparently accepted the would-be monarch as your monarch, with a capital M, the fact that the crown cannot truly bring about peace and joy as you thought it would, as everybody thinks it would do, as everyone's would-be monarch tells them, more or less, that once I get in charge, not necessarily those words, but that's what it's saying. That is what the molecules are wired up to put into words, no matter what the language, that now you're becoming an adult, now you're becoming responsible, now you're becoming a good, whatever it is, Jew, Christian, Buddhist, Democrat, American, Italian. And now you're finally going to be somebody. You're going to leave childish, chaotic things behind, and now you get on with the real purpose of life. You know, getting smart, getting wise, pulling yourself together, all of that. So, with almost all people in the state, out there, in the state in here, it reaches the point that the would-be ruling powers have apparently taken sole control, and they are the monarch with a capital M, but no one notices in the way in which I'm describing it. They can't notice it in the 3D world, that the crown, now that it is firmly on the throne, now that it firmly, apparently, at least as firmly as everybody else's monarch, can say, yes, I'm Fred, and yes, I'm Mary, or vice versa. But yes, well. That then, it is not diagnosed, it is not seen in this way, that once the monarch seems firmly, and perhaps rightfully, on the throne, that now the crown cannot bring about the peace, the pleasure, the enlightenment that everyone assumes everywhere on this planet will occur. And yet, this kind of progression in the individual life and in the life of mankind, going continually from this primitive state of anarchy into a stable condition of a monarchy, and it never brings about what people expected, there is still no widespread revolution. And nobody really notices it in this way. It's as though, this of course is not true, but if I was speaking psychologically, which of course I sure as hell am not, it is as though everybody finally accepts the reign of their monarch, and once it's firmly on the throne, you'll give it a day or so maybe, you expect, hey, paradise is here. Whew, now I finally have somebody in charge that knows what they're doing. From here on out, it's going to be smooth white. And it's not. Not even close. But it's as though, if I were speaking psychologically, that albeit true for everybody, it's as though everybody looks around after a day or so and they realize the monarchy has not brought about what I expected, and it looks around and suddenly realizes it doesn't with anybody else. And it's as though, if I were speaking psychologically, if there was such a thing and I would fool with it, it's as though everybody likewise looks at themselves and then looks at everybody else, and that everybody realizes it, and it's such, how shall I say it, a disheartening fraud state of affairs that it's as though there is a tacit, just a look between all people of let's don't ever mention this. I won't and don't you. After that, who knows? I'll go back to the temple. I'll go see a priest. I'll dress up and find out if let's make a deal is still in the air. The revolution, capital R. There would apparently be two ways to look at, it should be the revolution. Because you people surely know that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a revolution. To talk about anything is truly beneath a real revolution. If you want to hear somebody talk about something, you should be somewhere else. I'm talking about the something. The revolution could be seen as either being staged as an assault from without. Now, of course, we know I'm talking about political affairs. That's what we're all about, right? It's a secret political group. I'm sorry, I was suddenly overcome. It was a flashback. Suddenly, Harold Stassen flashed before his life flashed before my very eyes. It was either that or Thomas Dewey without a mustache. A revolution, the revolution, could be seen as being an assault staged from without, or it could be as an internal challenge arising from the midst of the capital P people themselves. A four-dimensional difference put into two-dimensional words between the two would be, in the former case, it would be likened to the destruction, the overthrow, the destruction of the old religious, philosophical ideas that seem to have been the nexus that held a state together, a particular state. In the latter case, it would be likened to the production, the offering up to the people of new views, new maps of the established ones, that is, the established religions, philosophies. There is a crucial difference between the two. There is, when I say crucial, of course, I'm not speaking historically or anyway in that kind of useless sense. I'm talking about in a way that has some meaning for people attempting to incite such a revolution within themselves, of course. There is, assuming you heard as simplistically as I put that there are two ways that you could look at a would-be revolution. It would apparently be very distinct, that is, an assault from without. The forces that we were talking about in the more physically describable fashion of a sovereign state out here, a revolution can be seen as forces outside the ruling powers, forces outside even the loyal opposition with a capital L and a capital O. The revolutionists out in the bush, out in the jungles, and they assault the ruling powers, that the whole thing is an assault apparently from without. That is, those out of power that want power. The other way would be to see it as a kind of perhaps less inflamed, less drastic kind of fifth column inner rebellion. They're amongst the people themselves, people going about their everyday affairs of being capital B bankers, capital M merchants, capital P priests, capital R reporters, that they apparently are attempting to stage a rebellion on the basis not of an absolute assault and overthrowing, tearing down and trampling all known idols, morals, mores, ideas, cultural icons, but as a kind of working from within, that they apparently are offering up new maps and new views of what is already established amongst the people. There would appear to be two distinct ways to look at a revolution, right? Sounds like it, but that is a two-dimensional description. And if you're given the possibility of one, only one of those two, then you will never be able to write, produce, direct, nor act in a real revolution. I hate to be the harbinger of bad news if there was another kind. But under those conditions, not only could you not write, produce, direct, or act in the revolution, if it was showing in your hometown, you'd never even know about it. If they showed it in your bedroom, it'd go right past you. If they went into your bathroom and showed the full film, you'd never be aware of it. Although you may be sitting there on the throne of power thinking about it, you would never see it. I'm as sorry as I can be I did that. Something else about, along the lines of, in regards to, in the matter of revolution. It's a new paragraph. Reform, in quotation marks. Reform is the perennial drug of the many. Of the people. While the few would know that only a revolution will do. What is the voice that seems to arise in humanity and in the individual, in that mechanical, finite progression that seems to go in humanity and in the individual from a primitive form of anarchy to what appears to be, if you did become by some mode of judgment an adult, a condition of stable monarchy? Along the way is the would-be voice of the monarch, is the would-be voice of the ruling powers, is the would-be voice of you, as it encourages, apparently, you along this natural mechanical progression, as it encourages you to calm down and be quiet, as it encourages you to listen to it because it is speaking for all of you, to listen to it because it's speaking for the good of you. Along the way, what does it speak of? Of course, not necessarily this word, but it is now that I've given it to you. The reality of its conversation was always on the basis of reform. You don't have to completely shut up, but just, oh, I don't know, shut up when Daddy's watching TV. Oh, I don't know, how about shut up after 9 o'clock at night? Oh, I don't know, how about shut up after you've been talking nonstop for 22 hours? Oh, I don't know, how about shut up when you see Daddy pick up a hatchet? No, you don't have to quit talking. No, no, no. Reform. And listen, you're old enough now. We'd like for things to calm down a little. Would you quit relieving yourself in your pants? Would you go to the bathroom by yourself so that I don't have to deal with it? See? You're not told, hey, listen, don't defecate anymore. That's it. You're now 7, stop it. No. Reform. Along more, perhaps spiritual, apparently spiritual, esoteric areas, a child, whether it be an individual child or whether it be humanity as a child, as a primitive form of anarchy. The mechanical progression from a primitive kind of anarchy to this more stable condition of a monarchy. In this progression, the would-be ruling powers do not say, you have got to stop hating people. You have got to stop transferring negative energy. No, no, no. Don't let your own smart bunch of rowdies in your own crowd think otherwise before I explain it correctly. Now there's some passing little proverbs, adages, is really what it should be, that seems to have validity only because of their age. Written on the walls in different places that say that the gods have said something like, being hostile is not really the best idea. But notice, humanity is not given an absolute directive, not an enforced directive, of do not transfer negative energy. Now you may think that some religions, or you may think that you've heard some adult tell a child, or you may think you've heard some government tell the people. Capital G, capital P, remember? Which, of course, I am speaking in parables other than this. Don't ever take a parable at face value. The government never even tells the people, do not transfer negative energy. All people are driven to do, all they really talk to about is reform it. You're now 7 years old. Do not hit your sister. Well, she makes me mad. Well, I know. She makes me mad sometimes, to tell you the truth. But you don't see me going around hitting her. I don't hit you when you make me mad, and you make me mad a lot of times. You're asked to reform. You're not asked to undergo a revolution. In other words, you're not asked, you're not told to stop it. The perennial drug, the perennial directive is reform. But for the real revolutionist, that's not good enough, because it does not produce what the would-be revolutionist wants. It does not produce what you assumed you wanted when you started this. Reform will not do. There's no way. Reform is simply the cry word, the byword, a kind of drug, a kind of lubricant for the mechanical, natural, ordinary progression that humanity and individuals undergo from what I'm describing to you now, this trail from a primitive form of anarchism to a more stable condition of a monarchy. But along the way, the byword, the linchpin, the drug, the oil, the directives, the instructions would be reform, 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 not stop. Remember what little I mentioned last week? I pointed out to you the real revolutionists either might or must ultimately see dialogue coming down to this. We're talking about revolutionary dialogue, and that is, I shoot, you listen. That is not reform. Life does not do that. No matter what some of your own internal noises may say. No matter that a person could end up at a physician's office, and the physicians say you either have got to quit drinking or you'll die. That's not, I shoot, you listen. It's still reform. Life does not require that anyone participate in a revolution. Of course, those of you who can jump past some of my words on these nights, at least periodically, and hang around a fourth and fifth dimension, understand that a revolution is not really in life's general overall plans anyway for man. So we're not talking about trying to inflame some widespread revolution or trying to spread whatever revolutionary potential or spirit might be amongst a few people, to keep that same kind of tenor and taste to it and just make it expand. That's not in, if life played at a table, it's not in life's cards. But with the individual, you've got to see that reform is a kiddie drug. Another paragraph, same general area. A real revolutionist knows that his only permanent allies are his own aim, his own temporary maps of correctness, and his own compass of operational directives. I guess it would have been shorter, if not sweeter, if I'd simply said the real revolutionist knows that he has but one permanent ally, and that is his aim. Everything else is a marriage of convenience, whether it be him smiling at his mother and his pater, whether it be smiling at the capital P priest, the local B banker, the capital N military man, at the capital P populace in general. It's all a temporary marriage of convenience. It may be a passing, quite fragile alliance, but he has no permanent ally except his own aim. And the expansion of that under own aim is what I was trying to sketch with the description, his own temporary maps of correctness, not true maps, because there are no true maps. Talk about your oxymorons, and no need to look up your family tree. Would be his own temporary maps of correctness and his own compass, which would be actually an OD compass. Part 2 coming up. A kind of privileged / special sense of humor would probably one of a revolutionist's most indispensable weapons. Not ordinary humor, and it's certainly, when I put my own special spin and adjectives on it, certainly not ordinary witticism, it's not run-of-the-mill sarcasm, it's in no form critical of anybody, it is not laughing at banana peels under the physical, intellectual, or emotional heel of another person. It is a kind of privileged humor. It is a kind of humor that is not available to just anybody. If it was, it would be of no benefit. It would have no use, and it would simply be back at the level that I pointed out to you, and on which all ordinary humor is, and that is, it is based upon, it is laced with, it is sown with the thread of hostility. There is always a very distinct but normally unrecognized dose of negative force, of negative energy and humor. What the revolutionist would have as one of his more indispensable weapons would be a kind of privileged humor. And that's all I'm going to tell you. unless you want to sew up on your own a large tapestry to go on the wall displaying the lives and legends of the jocose warrior. Skip a couple lines, let's try another paragraph. Let's talk about something else, completely off the subject. How about a good old dogmatic statement? Okay. The one thing that no ordinary person can tell is what they seem to be. Now forget about anything else that you can't describe what it is you learned in chemistry back in high school, or how your first boyfriend or girlfriend looked, or what you had for dinner on April the 12th, 1969. The one thing that no ordinary person can ever tell is what they seem to be. And thusly, life makes everyone try to do so. In this same diverse and distant galactic area, the real revolutionist would have yet another motto. I've given you a few, and I won't promise not to come up with more, but another one that I do have the privilege to have found out about. That another one of the real revolutionist motto would be, I don't do interviews. Up, down, left, right, inside out, I simply don't do interviews. Skip a half a line in this same disjointed area. The real revolutionist comes to understand that there is no need for torture, because every word that ordinary people speak is a confession. The real revolutionist, in the case of the real revolutionist, the closest he would come to having some implement of torture would be time. All you got to do is stand back and wait. Because every word that the people say, that is the ordinary, are we talking about out there in the state or in here in the state? I don't know, and I wish you'd quit asking. It just slows things down. The real revolutionists would understand that every word that is uttered by the ordinary is a confession of sorts. Every one. You mean every one? What the hell did I say? Every word. Listen. Listen to your own mechanical palaver and bladder. Or is it blitter? Blitter bladder. Listen to everyone else talking. If you can listen through that special weapon of a privileged kind of humor, that is, you're not tied to any critical concept of whether people are right, wrong, literate, unreasonable, but you listen, and every word that is uttered by ordinary people, including your own people, is a confession of sorts. No need for torture. No need for threats even, which of course is a form of torture to the ordinary. How else do you think the monarchy finally, well, you can study your own damn history. But even as the real revolutionist sees that in the masses and the ordinary people, including his own ordinary people. From the monarch on down to the ordinariest of the ordinary. That every word they utter is a confession of sorts. Even with that understanding, with the ability to hear his own people talk, that every time they talk, it is a confession. I don't mean some new confession. It's the same old damn confessions over and over and over. But even while he understands that, he then has to have as his motto still, as long as it's correct, that the people may do that, the king may do that, the bankers, the generals, the artistes, the writers, the street sweepers, the intelligentsia of my people may do that. I don't do interviews. But it's got to be, I don't do interviews. Even if from amongst the people. Say there steps forth one who apparently is fairly intelligent and says, I would like to know more about you. I'd like to ask you a question. I would like to pass along some energy. I'd like to give you some attention. Now amongst the people, everybody's a fool for that. Between themselves. A capital R reporter can go up to a capital G general and say, I would like to do an interview about you and your meteoric rise in the military. And the general out there and the general in here, the banker out there, the banker in here says, I couldn't be more delighted. In fact, there is a tacit compliment to the other person on your intelligence by being interested in me. And the general out there and the general in here, the banker out there, the banker in here says, I couldn't be more delighted. In fact, there is a tacit compliment to the other person on your intelligence by being interested in me. But by the same token, the general can turn to the reporter and say, how in the world did somebody get to be a reporter? And the reporter say, well, okay, let me turn off my tape recorder and I'll tell you. If what appears to be a revolutionist can be suckered into that, that's not a judgmental statement. If a would-be revolutionist gives out an interview to anybody, you were banking on the wrong revolution. You had mistook just a common fucker in the crowd as being a revolutionist. But if he or she gives interviews, you've been going down a primrose grossly mistaken path, because you are not dealing with a revolutionist. Because one of the real revolutionist mottos would be, if he or she would indeed even say this much, but it would be at least silently and secretly, I don't do interviews. Even with the words, I guess I do, I'm about to. I'm intending by my little acting, my little inflection of voice, what little there was, I don't do interviews, period. Unconditionally, no discussion. I don't sell interviews. I don't entertain the idea. I don't have to think about it. I don't do interviews. Anybody that does interviews is not a revolutionist. And anybody that does interviews, no matter what they apparently are saying and no matter what they're apparently talking about, they are confessing. They are being tortured by being alive. They're being tortured by having, in an unsatisfactory manner, gone from this state of anarchy to a state of apparently stable monarchy. And it's not what they thought. It's not apparently what life had told them. It's not apparently what their elders had told them. It's not what apparently everybody else expected. But now it seems, as I said, as though there is now a secret society between me and everybody else that, wow, things didn't work out like we thought they would. But hey, let's don't talk about it. I ain't going to mention it, and don't you mention it. And after that, everybody does interviews. Oh, they don't apparently say, life has really been a bummer. I mean, there are a few I know people here and there that do that. That's not the point. The people, the populace in general, will never admit that. It's always, I'm in a stage of attempted reform. I'm improving my life. I'm getting closer to happiness. I'm getting closer to joy. Sometimes even her sister. I'm getting closer to making something of my life, of reaching my goals, reaching someone's goals. But all you got to do is look at somebody. You don't have to flash a tape recorder. You don't have to pull out a reporter's notebook. You don't really have to say much of anything. You just have to kind of give a look like, and they'll confess. Oh, all right, I'll tell you. What do you want to know about me? A real revolutionist does not do interviews. A little update. What I had sketched out for you regarding the, I remind you again, but especially in this case, of the severe limitations of binary words, which all words you remember are binary, even under 3D conditions. So severe limitations, but let's go on. The tape's getting short, and I got something else I want to do tonight. But under those limitations, being able to hold that simultaneously in mind with what I'm going to say, which of course flies in the face of ordinary consciousness, which I know all of you can crank up your engines and fly in the face of. What appears to be negative energy can only flow from apparently inferior positions and people, which is the same thing, but I throw it in for those of you that still don't think you're hearing me, towards superior positions, not the other way around. Superior positions cannot criticize, cannot find fault with, cannot pass down what apparently is negative energy and food from a superior position to an inferior one, only the other way around. Now I wanted to ask you, in what way might this be related to, in what way might you be able to use this in considering the three forces? In what way might this have some correctness, that is, some useful purpose in the ever-changing triads of human existence? On a larger scale, in the triaxial dance itself of apparently things, verbs, and even in the 3D world, apparently nouns, that is, things. But the process going, the force is apparently going from C to D to E to C to D to E to D to E to C to D, C, and so on. What might the correctness of me telling you that apparently the based energies cannot flow except from an inferior position to a superior one, what might, that is, what correct usage might this have in this ever-changing dance of energies from C to D to E, and so forth and so on and forever, if it can only work in that way? I'll at least hint to you the possible ramifications are DS, damn staggering. If you don't find them so, then you're not listening to the revolutionist ear. You're not even listening. You didn't even hear what I said. Another question. It's really the second time I've asked it of late, and I may ask it at least one more time sometime. But is it possible is it just actually possible, materially, physically possible, for a superior position, a superior force to be seen, to be actually seen, to be even seen by an inferior one? I already pointed out to you that in the 3D world, what appears to be negative energy can only go from an inferior position to a superior one. But now I'm asking you, hint, hint, can the inferior position even see the superior one. And yet, that is the flow of apparent negative energy. Well, two other little quick sub-paragraphs, or what it would be less than a sub-paragraph, or a little bit more than one. Could you see the possibility that you, as an individual, can only be angry at inferior positions in you? To be walking along and go, oh, goddamn motherfucker, that your clumsiness, to put a word on it, an everyday word, caused you to stump your toe. In what direction, based upon what I'm telling you, does any form of negative, apparent negative energy, including criticism, to stump one's toe and then holler, you goddamn motherfucker? Or we can say, or a person out of the ordinary populace could say, well, I was cursing the toy that I stubbed my toe on. I was cursing my wife, I guess, for leaving it there. No. That may appear to be true, but that's not correct. You're cursing absolutely an inferior position. You're cursing. You're seeing negative energy toward an inferior position, but it's in you. In this case, I'm putting a word on it, a reasonable word, your own clumsiness, your own narrow vision that you didn't see it. Let's just call it your own clumsiness. You see what I'm getting at. It is only that even within you, in your state. It is only the inferior positions. Now, I got to ask you again, what might that infer? What might be the SR, the staggering ramifications of all forms of apparent desire to reform? If it only can flow in that direction, that you can only find fault even internally with inferior position. Well, I got to get up here and do the clowning around of staggering, but I'm going to leave it to you. At least a partial footnote, how about this? Along that same line. I'm not talking about the Rock Island line. Can you see in a certain way that ordinary consciousness, you got to listen quick, ordinary consciousness can't really be angry with the concept of God? Remember, we're not talking about anything correct. I'm talking about man's concepts. What life has made ordinary consciousness molecularly think up, dream of, imagine, have faith in. Ordinary consciousness cannot send negative energy toward God, toward man's concept of God. As I said, you got to listen fast, because if we were speaking in so-called psychological terms, or if I was actually held down by the gravity and had any faith in three-dimensional reality and two-dimensional words, it'd be another story. You'd say, well, that's a kind of philosophical thing that humanity's talked about. Or maybe it's even the absolute spiritual reality of the fact that God is so superior that we got no right to send him anger, that you'd have to be really cut off from the grace and the will of the gods to be angry with the gods. You'd be less than even a decent, minimal human. I'm down to the molecular level where we all belong. Under ordinary conditions, the human organism is not wired up to send negative energies toward this concept of a higher power, i.e. gods. How about even into what appears to be, or could appear to be, a more up-to-date, sophisticated world of yellow systems monarchies, stable, of apparently yellow system-based men trying to debate all these ideas about, hey, if there are gods, then they got to be supremely potent, all-knowing, and if they're got all power and all knowledge, why they let there be evil? And since there is evil, and we all see that, that either shows that they don't know everything, they don't know good from evil, or it shows that they don't have enough power to stop it. And if either one of those be true, then what we're calling gods aren't gods, and ... all that kind of stuff, all that kind of yellow circuit hobby. The stories of Job, of the good man, that is a conscious man, a developed man. Forget whether you're in the context of being a good Jew or later a good Christian. I don't guess Christians take credit for it, but they say he would have been a Christian if he'd lived longer, I guess. But at any rate, the story of a man who was apparently doomed for some period of time to stub his toe, to say the least. And yet, he never gets mad at God. And yet, even the philosophers that do not seem to qualify at the level of an Old Testament prophet, ordinary people that just say, good grief, my wife died in a car wreck, my child has cancer. Under ordinary conditions, people, you know this, people do not get out and curse God. From a certain hardwired, smart-aleck viewpoint, you could go out to a fundamentalist Western Protestant revival and see some guy that claims to be Captain Chaos in charge of faith healing. And he's wearing glasses and a toupee, and you can say, hey, this ain't going to work. Or somebody can come up and he'll ask him, what's your problem? And he'll say, well, I'm here to see you, brother. First, I want to tell you that I drove 500 miles to see you. I bought all your books. I listened to you on the radio. And I believe that you're truly a man of God. And I believe in God, and I love God with all my heart. And Reverend Chaos says, all right, and what's the story? And he says, well, my wife just died in a car wreck, and my little child, my infant child, has cancer. Now, from a smart-aleck viewpoint, if you're out there in the crowd, if you were part of the crowd, if you were part of your crowd, you could say, how can that man stand there and say how much he loves God, how much faith he has in Brother Chaos, and how he drove 500 miles, how he reads the Bible, when he just admitted, he claimed he's there to be helped, and he hopes God will help him. Can't that dumb fucker, doesn't he see? It had to be God if he believes in a thing. It was God that had his wife or let his wife get killed in a car wreck. It's God that let his little child get cancer. And now he's here getting a guy with a toupee and glasses to faith heal him and get him out of it. And the smart-aleck voice out in the populace could go, hey, give me a break. That kind of voice does not understand. That kind of negative energy can only flow in one direction. Ordinary consciousness, that is a molecular structure that is called human consciousness, is not wired up to criticize God. That's how man's concept of God gets away with fucking murder. That's why it cannot be philosophically explained away in a satisfactory manner. That if there is a God, how come he lets there evil in the world? In every generation, at least 500-600 new would-be philosophers graduate and get their PhD and make some kind of living. They're thinking about this. And of course the rest of the mob, the rest of the people, they're confronted with it. It's just a matter, well, I need the drug of reform. There is no way to explain this. We can't understand it. But notice, men cannot send up curses. Men cannot send negative energy to their concepts of God. It is a splendid arrangement. It is a beautiful arrangement. In a sense, if we were speaking in philosophical and psychological terms, which I sure am not, it's as though life itself, as always, has arranged molecularly for men to be unable, the creature we call man, the collection of molecules we call man, to send negative energies toward higher positions, such as their concepts of God. And it's as though, if we were speaking in psychological terms, which I'm not, that life has likewise made men, without realizing it, become rationalizers for God. Nobody holds God responsible. Pray for me, brother. I'm dying of cancer right now. Pray for me. And of course, from some smart-aleck viewpoint out there, a stranger hanging around the faith healing tent can go, as I've already said, you dumb, you know what? What are you there praying to this God of yours to cure you from cancer? If it's a God like you always say it is, and like I hear you people talk about, it was him that gave you the cancer, or at least he stood by and let you get it. Now you're going to pray to him. Give me a break. There are no such common voices as that. Humanity, that is ordinary consciousness, the people do not criticize and condemn the gods. If anything, if we were speaking psychological terms, which we're not, they are apologists. They rationalize for God. Oh, sure, I'm dying of cancer, but... and so on. this has more significance. You people that have been around the block with me a few times do understand I am not talking about Reverend Chaos. I'm not talking about canvas tents. I'm not talking about faith healing. I'm not really talking about sovereign states. Well, sometimes I am. One more little thing for the first part of this tape. Another kind of little update. Me speaking the last few weeks about the molecular patterns of pleasure in people. Now, to you people specifically, this is just one view. It's a correct view. But this is one view that I want to stress that, as far as I'm concerned, I did not correctly impress upon, in specific words, you last week. That is, from one correct view for you people, the highest form of lateral molecular pleasure is in first class gourmet yellow systems food. That is first class gourmet learning. This can be good even apparently for red and blue systems difficulties. It should be, another small motto is learn, damn it, learn. I keep coming up with small, well, short-range projects getting you involved with this. It is not to take away from the need for red circuit food. It's not to distract it all from artistic and or other hobbies you may have. But I'm telling you, in the lateral, that which is available to you kind of people on an everyday basis, the highest form of lateral molecular pleasure to feed yourself, which you should be doing every damn day, is of a first-class gourmet type yellow systems food. Any day that you let go by without that, you're cheating yourself. And you're not cheating yourself on some kind of basis that you're not making me sufficiently happy or that you're not reforming yourself a tempo. I'm telling you, you're hurting yourself. You're out in the bushes attempting to be a revolutionist, and you might as well be out there with a girly magazine. And for women, you might as well be out there with, I don't want to go into it, but suffice it to say, I'm intending to tell you that you are out there only playing with the revolution, or perhaps something else. We're going to stick another little something on. For you people seeing the public side of the tape, scratch that. In fact, scratch it all. You know, this is it. Director, producer, somebody. We are going to have recorded for you a piece of some more information that came into my hands from you-know-who. This is not the run-of-the-mill Kyroots, but here goes.
I have at hand one of mankind's most sought-after secret books, an ancient collection of wisdom known at various times by several different names, called once the Words of Cryptic News, another day known as Ideas of Unpredictable Results. During yet another era, men called the tome Advice of Preposterous Value. I have brought you some selected excerpts, which, for the moment, we can simply refer to as the UFN folio, Unidentified Flying Nevers. Never take a short horse the long way home.
Never make daytime plans for nighttime activities.
Never discuss robbery with a bullet maker.
Never give up unless you're real tired or late.
Never seek in the dictionary that which could be found in a kitchen drawer.
Never give to a charity run by poor people.
Never say die unless you're really dead or real tired.
Never patronize a religion whose central icon is an accordion, computer, or food processor.
Never remove your underpants in a tornado. Or in a tornado, for that matter.
Never ever confess unless you're really tired or frightened or late.
Never hesitate to let someone else's conscience be your guide. As good as any other approach.
Never ask a priest for stock tips. Never ask a rabbi to paint your house, and never ask a mullah for a shave. In fact, never ask a religionite for anything.
Never volunteer unless they ask, who's really tired?
Never spit out the window of a passing bus.
Never, while in a foreign land, should you ask directions of a stranger.
Never take anyone's word for anything, unless you can slip it in your pocket while the store dick is otherwise flaccid and distracted.
Never give up the ship, unless it's someone else's ship, or unless you're on a train, or unless there's a darn good reward for its return.
Never get too carried away with the rocket's red glare and bombs bursting in air.
Never believe your elders until you are one. And even then, you better watch it.
Never purchase office supplies on the weekend or just before a natural disaster.
Never give information to a child.
Never watch yourself leave.
Never store bullets in a toaster or butter in a blind trust.
Never let your right hand know what your left one is doing unless they're both yours.
Never leave your hat with a plumber.
Never think faster than you can speak unless you want to feel really weird.
Never use your real name, even if you know it.
Never save the wrapping paper from an expert's opinion.
Never give all of your money to someone you don't know.
Never hesitate to guard trade secrets with someone else's life.
Never comb your hair in front of a rug merchant.
Never say to a beautiful woman, "So how's the weather up there?" And never say to a jockey, "Has anyone ever told you you're beautiful?"
Never pay a child for his opinion.
Never toss your rusted kitchen utensils to a mob of angry rich people.
Never expect gratitude to come by UPS.
Never answer the door unless it says, "Please," or speaks Armenian.
Never volunteer to be shot.
Never volunteer to disappear.
Never sell your birthright to a woman or a duck who suddenly claims to be your long-lost brother.
Never leave your life savings in a doctor's office, a barber's shop, an elevator, or a used paint store.
Never let your guard down for a moment. Oh, okay, but just for a moment.
Never cut corners unless they cut you first.
Never look under the carpet in a mortuary.
Never borrow from Peter to pay Paul unless Paul is with the mafia or Paul has a rocket launcher and wants the bread real bad, or unless you'll never see Peter again.
Never leave a forwarding address at a flea market.
Never tell a distant relative that you've died.
Never pick just one unless that's all the choice is.
Never eat your mail without opening it first.
Never tango with a surgeon named Brutus.
Never smile at a man with a used car or wife.
Never let them appoint you head of the Federal Reserve System.
I got a little funny that somebody sent me from one of you people out of town. I won't tell you which of you people or which from out of town. It was this person's own little series of shots, and it says, language is like the moon. Everybody sees it, but nobody knows what the hell it's for. You people out of town, anybody that has any musical interest, I was going to mention this to the people here in Atlanta, but I might as well mention it now. Just a little idea I had. One of my reoccurring interests in certain forms of music. And we've got enough people in some of the other cities, and I was going to mention this to you people here, just for me, and of course your own fun. Why don't some of you get together? I was specifically thinking about quartets, and do something such as take one of these string quartets from Schoenberg or Berg, one of the good serial writers, even if it was for quartet for miscellaneous wind instruments. Anyway, we got enough people with talent, you could write it into the correct range. And I would love to, suggest. It's like take one of Schoenberg's string quartets and transcribe it for electric guitar, electric bass, piano, and synthesizer. Just 4 possibilities. You can look at that as being of no great consequence, but task. One of them's bombs away. Remember, fill in the blank? The bombs away is, there's 2 versions of that I want you to respond to. You don't have to send it to me unless you're carried away with it. But do it to yourself. 2 versions. The bombs away is, quote, to be human is to feel blank. The 2 versions is, I want you to fill in the blank, the bombs away, is one of them from the view of the people. That is an ordinary view, a view just part of the populace. An answer. Fill in the blank. To be human is to feel blank. Then, if that doesn't give you the terminal blues and send you off to Memphis or somewhere, fill it in, play bombs away with version 2 from a revolutionist viewpoint. the one out there in the bushes on the edge of the city, that which you would be if you were so inclined to play bombs away. The revolutionist version of to be human is to fill blank. Besides that, another form of a task I want you to do again. Everybody. You people out of town do it for 1 week after you see the tape. It's for 1 hour. That is for each hour, every hour that you're awake during the day. Do something creative, artistic. If it's just make a sketch again, if a little cartoon, write down a quick poem. An epigram, at the very least, on a sad, cold, cloudy day, on a real slow hour, at least write down an epigram, a maxim, an axiom, a proverb, anything but an adage. See, because an adage will not be original, it will not be creative. So damn it, don't you write down an adage and think that you fulfill the task. But every hour, wherever you are, we've been through this. Most of you, except some of you out of town, might be the first time you are hearing it. But all week, for the next 7 days, once an hour, just take out what little time is necessary and do something that will qualify as being original. A miniature, at the very least, little work of original art, of originality. Without fail, once an hour, be sure and keep track of it. And for you people out there, that's all.